Exercise 1. As scientific knowledge has substantially expanded, our approach to knowledge may have changed. The earlier naive beliefs in undeniable truths have given way to the contextualization of knowledge, dramatically expressed as the end of grand narratives. This is evident in the changing approaches towards expert knowledge, dramatically expressed as the end of grand narratives. This is evident in the changing approaches towards expert knowledge from full trust in the skills of the expert to a reserved trust, which places a higher burden of judgment on the individuals and the society. A major shift from science to research is identified in the production of scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge allows us to develop new technologies, solve practical problems, and make informed decisions, both individually and collectively. According to this shift, knowledge becomes less final and more open to change. Science was associated with certainty, coldness, aloofness, objectivity, distance, and necessity. But research was, in contrast, uncertain, open-ended, immersed in many lowly problems of money, instruments, and know-how. Exercise 2. The early modern readers of travel accounts were likely to be interested in the descriptions of far-off peoples and places. But travel literature has also historically served to promote national, religious, and cultural identities. Simon Schama has suggested that the struggle to control the sea was an important aspect of the emerging Dutch identity, an identity worn through transformative ordeals. Stories describing Dutchmen persevering in the face of tremendous difficulties gave the Dutch something similar to a heroic epic that formed the essence of what it meant to be Dutch in the 17th century. Through stories like those presented in travel literature, the Dutch represented themselves by creating a type of heroic myth. Travel literature has always been associated with the construction of utopias, which were founded on the idea of unknown lands. This was a myth in the sense of a popular conception of a person or thing which exaggerates or idealizes the truth, rather than a completely fictitious story. Exercise 3. You may notice that certain smells make it harder for your baby to come down and enter into a state of shared attention with you. If you're wearing a strong perfume or aftershave lotion, does he turn his head away when you approach him? If you suspect that your child may have sensitivities or may be underactive to various smells, try putting different foods or fragrances near his nose and see if he recoils or frowns with annoyance or fails to show any reaction at all. It's a good idea to check out your baby's olfactory, smelling responses, since smell and taste are close sensory cousins. Odors come from molecules in the air that stimulate receptors in the nose. If an organism does not have a receptor for that particular odor molecule, for that organism, the odor has no smell. Some children with hypersensitivities to smell can't handle food if it's too pungent, while others may need stronger odors and tastes to help them tolerate certain food groups. Exercise 4. In a political debate, you feel that the other side just doesn't get your point of view, and if they could only see things with your clarity, they would understand and fall naturally in line with what you believe. They must not understand, because if they did, they wouldn't think the things they think. By contrast, you believe you totally get their point of view and you reject it. You don't need to hear them elaborate on it because you already know it better than they do. That's why you have to rely on those people who support your position in order to win the debate. So each side believes it understands the other side better than the other side understands both its opponents and itself. Exercise 5. We're all prone to overestimate our abilities as well as our power to control our destiny. People have a false sense of security on the highway because they consider themselves above-average drivers and expect their skill to protect them, even though many accidents are caused by factors beyond their control. Similarly, when asked how long it will take to complete a project, people typically underestimate the time because they're too confident in themselves and don't allow for delays beyond their control. Positive emotions broaden people's perspectives and enable them to build skills that help them flourish both personally and professionally. This optimism bias causes people to underestimate the risk of some types of negative events in their own lives. They're fully aware that something bad can happen. In fact, they often have an unrealistically high expectation that it will happen, but they tell themselves it will happen to someone else. Exercise 6. Elections are an important part of political systems in many countries, both for governments and for many groups within and between countries. People vote for the leaders of their national government and their local government, their staff representatives on the boards of large organizations, and the leaders of their professional societies. Voting is believed to deliver representatives who are anchored somewhat to the wishes of their electorate, and as such voting is seen as a vital input in discovering the material interests of the voting population. Voting is therefore something that governments generally wish to encourage, and policymakers may be asked to recommend interventions that would increase voter turnout. Everyone who has the right to vote in an election can file a complaint concerning errors in the election. Some countries, such as Australia, fine citizens who do not vote, and others simply set up polling places and entreat people to come. Exercise 7. Cultures are tricky. Once people believe in one, they will find it difficult to accept evidence that challenges it. An internal logic is at work, a selective interpretation of evidence, a tendency to interpret experience in line with what people already believe. If we are able to step back from what we believe for a moment and see culture for what it really is, we will recognize that what we all believe is in large part the product of our social life. Therefore, those who disagree with our basic beliefs are neither fools nor free actors. The culture of an organization is a powerful reason why individuals do not freely seek their personal truths. They are usually a part of a social world that sees reality differently from us. What they believe may or may not be truer than what we believe, but all of us should not be as tempted to be certain that we have the truth. Exercise 8. As for medieval thinkers, it was taken as an unquestionable fact that the heavens were perfect, and therefore all motion in heaven had to display perfection, and thus be circular. There was no scope for irregularities within the heavenly spheres. This belief caused terrible problems when it came to observing the orbits of the planets and their retrograde motion. Somehow what was observed had to be resolved in terms of perfect circles. Although medieval thinkers were logical, they used deductive logic. In other words, they started with principles and theories. For example, the heavenly spheres are the realm of perfection. Perfect and eternal motion is circular. And then deduced what observation ought to follow. When the medieval person looked up to the stars and planets, he or she saw meaning and significance because the earth was at the center of the universe. This was in stark contrast to inductive arguments, as used by later science, where evidence is gathered as the basis for framing a theory.